With that, I will call to order the College Township regular council meeting of Thursday, May 16th, 2024. Before we start, everyone who can stand, please stand and join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I
pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Before we start into the agenda, the chair has an announcement to make, and that is for the first time in several months, this council did not convene an executive session prior to tonight's meeting. That's why we're starting on time. All right, that takes us to public open discussion. First, anybody in the room like to address council on anything that is not already on tonight's agenda? Not looking likely in the room. Jen, is that the extent of our?
Yeah, I'm going to move that hand so that you don't think it's being raised all day.
Okay. Nobody online?
Nope.
Okay. That concludes public open discussion. That takes us to new agenda items. This is the opportunity for council members to request anything be considered for tonight's agenda that's not already on the agenda.
None.
No? No? Oh, we're moving along well then. That concludes that item. That takes us to special presentations. SP1, the College Township Annual Audit Report. I see that Mike Rosenberry is not present, but we have
something even better.
Even better. It wouldn't be the annual audit without you. So welcome. You'll have to announce yourself. We're live all across America. So. Normally you're here, but since you're in Zoom, if you just introduce yourself, this is an action item. Right. But before we consider action, we'll turn the floor over to our representative from Fiore, Fideli, Snyder, and Carruthers.
Thank you and good evening. I'm not Mike Roseberry, I'm Joe Fideli, also a principal of the firm. It's my pleasure to present the annual audit report, final draft. We have a couple of things to add in before we can actually issue it. But what we like to do is we bring the draft to council for their acceptance. And I'll kind of walk you through the basic components of the statements of the report. And feel free to interrupt me with any questions or comments, or we can address them at the end, however you prefer. So what I've actually done... The end, by the way, Joe, the end. The end.
Is he telling you to be at the end?
Questions at the end.
Questions at the end.
Okay, questions at the end, that's fine. So what I've done with my printed copy is I've basically split it into 6 or 7 sections. The first section and the first few pages is my opinion, our opinion on the financial statements. All right, and it is our opinion that the financial statements as they're presented are in conformity with generally accepted accounting principles as they're promulgated in the United States of America for government units and government authorities and like yourselves, townships, boroughs, and the like. And that is really the formal extent of our involvement, although it's very much time is expended in deriving that. Okay, so the first paragraph is the opinion as I've just summarized it. We then go into the basis for our opinion. We outline the fact that management has the responsibility for the overall financial statement, and it's our job to audit those statements. In auditing the statements, we're required to exercise professional judgment and maintain professional skepticism throughout the audit. And even though we've been fortunate and been involved with the township for many years, we have had rotation between and among our staff, and then within the staff, the varying duties. Up until his recent resignation, Bob Long has been responsible as finance director for drafting the financial statements. And we provide input and feedback, and obviously we have to read them to be sure that that in our opinion, they still comply with the generally accepted accounting principles. But the financial statements themselves are the responsibility of management. We evaluate the appropriateness of the policies. We also consider, sort of towards the end, whether there are conditions or events that raise substantial doubt about the entity, the township in this case, ability to continue as a going concern for a reasonable period of time. And that's generally considered to be more than a year after the issuance of the financial statements, unless we know something other than that to the contrary. The report has required supplementary information, such as a budget to actual, and also the management's discussion and analysis, which follows the opinion. And then there's also supplementary information that's not required, but is included to otherwise detail or expand upon what's in the basic financial statements themselves. And that's sort of all the way down at the end, and it has more to do with the other governmental funds that the township maintains, for example, the road machinery fund and the capital projects fund, Parks and Rec fund, library fund, those types of funds, which it levies taxes for those particular purposes or receives funds from the state also. But they get rolled up, and they are not discreetly presented in the basic financial statements, because that would just make them very, very cumbersome and hard to really digest. And then at the very end, we have a report which we issue in accordance with government auditing standards, which is issued by Government Auditing Standards, what used to be the GAO, and that addresses compliance with laws, regulations, contracts, and other agreements that non-compliance with which would have a material effect on the financial statements. And we also address in that report the internal control over financial reporting, and whether or not we see or noticed any deficiencies in your procedures or internal control, and we noted none. Accountants are hard pressed to give positive assurance, but we're pretty good at issuing negative assurance on much of what we do. Only because the nature of an audit is that we don't look at every transaction, we don't look at every item. Our work is based upon scope and testing and judgment, and so we can't. It's not an absolute assurance, because there could be fraud, there could be other things that are in there that because of collusion or other impacts to that, we may not be able to find, even though we otherwise would consider having done a very good audit. The next section is management's discussion and analysis. We're missing a couple of kind of perfunctory items, which I think Adam and maybe Mike are going to help us fill in.
Correct.
One of the things.
That's correct, yes. We'll get, I said that's correct, yes, we'll be providing those details.
Yeah, and other than a couple of highlights for 2023, which shouldn't be too hard to pull together, and some budgetary highlights for 2024 at the end of this section, the rest of it is, it's designed to be a layman's description of what the financial statements are, how they're pulled together, what they reflect, some of the highlights of changes in your net position, which we'll get to in a minute, which is really the change in your balance sheet, your quote-unquote equity. An overview of revenues and expenses, a little bit of discussion on tax base, and those kinds of things which the Government Accounting Standards Board believes is required to supplement the financial statements, but not be a part of the financial statements. Okay, and this is by and large drafted by Bob Long and members of management, and our responsibility is to read the information, compare it to the basic financial statements, make sure it's reasonably consistent and the numbers cross-check and those kinds of things. But it's really, as stated, it's management's summary, kind of on a layman's approach to the overall financial statement, which you can see are quite voluminous. Okay. The next section are what are termed the government-wide financial statements. And this is an attempt to compare or allow readers to compare or contrast the results of your township and your government between others. And it brings into the financial statements what for many years were excluded. Principal among them would be the assets that are invested in your infrastructure, which are then subjected to depreciation allowances. And depreciation is merely a way to smooth the costs of a long-term asset among financial reporting periods. So if you have something that's going to last, you think 10 years, you write it off over 10 years, even though you spent the money in year one, and you might have borrowed the money and be repaying it back over 5 years or 10 years or what have you. So the statement of net position derives net position by the difference between the assets and the liabilities of the township. The accounts payable, you have roughly $6 million in cash and roughly $3 million in payables. A lot of those payables are monies held for sureties on behalf of there's projects and those kinds of things. But you can see it does bring in roughly $19 million worth of capital assets, and then we have about $4.5 million worth of debt. And so the net position of the township is roughly $18.5 million. So that's summarized there on your MD&A, and it's also down on what's shown as page 14. If you look at the page number at the bottom of the PDF.
That?
Okay. You wanna scroll down to what's page 15 in the report? There you go. Keep going one or two more. There you go. So that's the statement in that position that I was just describing. And you can see 26 million of assets, $8 million of liabilities, and what's quote unquote left over is your net position. Roughly $18.5 million. Mm-hmm. Okay? And then the net position is further delineated as to invested in capital assets, net of related debt. And the reason we do that is because even though you have $18.5 million worth of net position, you can't spend it, you can't eat it, you can't use it, you can't do anything with it. It's already spent, it's already borrowed, and so it's in the ground someplace. And then we do have other parts of the net position which are available for spending or other purposes, and that's broken down to the restricted and unrestricted portions that you can see there.
Down one?
You're good. I'm sorry.
Okay.
Okay.
The next page is the statement of activities. Again, bringing in the expenses of the township as reduced by charges for services and operating, and in this case we don't have any capital grants, to get the net expenses. And the reason, and I'm sure many of you are familiar with financial statements of commercial organizations. They don't start with expenses, they start with revenue. All right, then they have cost of goods sold or other expenses, and they come down to a net profit. The reason these are presented this way is that the Government Accounting Standards Board theorizes that governments aren't in the business or it's not their mission to raise money and spend it like a commercial concern would be. Their position is that governments are their mission, their business is to spend those monies that the governing body and the electorate requires, demands, or otherwise desires them to provide. Whether it's police services or road services or culture and recreation, you can see a number of them there. The idea is that you spend money that is needed to be spent. You find or you receive charges for those services or grants for those services, which defray what the government is then has to provide. And then down below that right-hand column, you have how are you going to close the gap? You have general revenues, you have interest, and you have other. So you have a change in net position of roughly $500,000, and that adds to the net position even after we've provided for, as I mentioned earlier, a little over $1 million worth of depreciation. Correct. The next set of financials or presentation, these are the governmental funds. Okay, and this is how the township runs its operation. And the general rule is that you have as few funds as is needed to properly identify and capture the revenues and expenses of the township. So you can see that the major funds that we show on this statement are the general fund, the debt service fund, the capital project funds, and the other governmental are down as they're detailed as supplementary information at the end of the report. And like I say, that's the special revenues for which you levy taxes, and it's the liquid fuels fund. Okay. So this for all practical purposes, this is cash, and it's monies or receivables that are expected to be collected in enough time so as to be able to satisfy current liabilities. It's a modified cash basis of accounting presentation, not full accrual like the government-wide financials are. So there's a statement, there's a balance sheet of the governmental funds, and then those fund balances are reconciled to the net position that we showed above. And then the next page is the second page after this is the revenues and expenses for each of the funds, and what happened, what came in, what went out, and the net change in fund balances, which again, for all practical purposes, is cash and liquid assets that are available to be used shortly after the balance sheet date to meet expenses and other current liabilities, if you will. Okay. Another page or two. There's two more. There you go. And this, in my copy, just didn't type it, but this is a budget to actual, which again is we audit the actual. We don't necessarily audit the budget, but we do present the two columns with the change, the differences, just to give the reader an idea of what was expected when you went into the year versus what you ended up coming out of the year with. And it's pretty close as far as expenses go. Actual revenues were a bit higher, which is good. So you actually added a bit more of fund balance than was budgeted, and that's always a good thing as well. The next couple pages summarize the trust agency funds for the pension and the 457 plan. Not much to do there. The next several pages are footnotes, financial statements, and these do a couple of things. They describe, where the township is and what its accounting policies are relative to the recognition of revenues and expenses and which funds it has and those kinds of things. It also goes on to detail information about your capital assets, information about your debt and your borrowings, what the interest rates are, how much is due to be paid in the future years. We also talk about other potentially includable, what we call component units. If you had, an authority or something that you completely controlled and you managed, then you may have to include an other entity in your financial statements, depending on the relationship of guaranteeing debt and those kinds of things. But you don't have any of those component units. The biggest, I think, the most closely related entity to the township, I think, would be the water authority. But the water authority stands on its own. They can raise their own rates. They can borrow money. You can gradually appoint other people if you don't like what they're doing. But once they're appointed, they stand alone and they operate the water authority as members of the water authority, and not necessarily simply as pawns or assigned members of the township. Then we get to the supplementary information. This is at 20 some pages of this. And as I said, the other governmental funds are detailed there. You got the highway aid fund, fire protection, road machinery, parks and rec, library. And there's a fund statement, balance sheet, and there's also revenues and expenses for each of those funds all the way at the end. And then, as I mentioned earlier, we have the report on internal control over financial reporting and compliance in accordance with government auditing standards.
Anything else, Joe?
No, that concludes my unprepared remarks. I'd be happy to entertain any questions or comments, whatever the council might have.
So just real quick, there were several locations as we were scrolling through, as we saw that we had some handwritten numbers on, and just to reiterate, this is a draft, and essentially and based on your opinion and the work that your firm has done, all the numbers work relative to the audit, and based on the recommendation that you described at the beginning of the presentation, council is in a position tonight, if I'm not mistaken, to accept the audit at this point, and then it would be put into a final draft. Those handwritten numbers would be obviously typed, and the missing information in the MD&A would also be included to round that out. Is that accurate?
Yeah, and that is accurate, and the reason we chose to just go ahead with this is because those missing, those other items, whether it's typing or what have you, are fairly perfunctory. They're just statistics or information, and if you say one of the budgetary highlights was you borrowed money, then we're not going to argue, council's not going to argue. Everybody knows that you borrowed more money and you put money in the ground, and there's capital expenditures and those types of things. So the numbers are settled. There's no surprises. They're not going to change. We'll pretty it up, if you will. We'll sign the reports. The numbers that you had the red marks on, I've already got those typed and changed in my draft or my version. And so we're, as far as I'm concerned, we're good to go, but for those those last couple administrative items.
Great, thanks, Joe.
Questions, Rich?
No questions.
Tracy?
No questions.
Okay, so what I heard was, really, there's no change. And honestly, the highlights of the year aren't even really required. I mean, that's just something that we've done over the year. And
That's part of the MD&A, right, the management discussion and analysis, right?
Okay, so any action tonight to accept the audit as presented would really be the last action council would need to take. You
That is
mentioned-
correct.
You mentioned the final draft, but in reality, the final draft would be the final. We're not going to come back and take another shot at it.
Once council has accepted it, a final will be completed, the firm and Joe will sign, but there will be no additional action that's going to be required by council.
Okay. If there's no questions and if council is satisfied, the chair will entertain a motion to accept the audit as presented and authorize staff to make final edits as noted here tonight and release it to interested parties or whatever, how to, good material to read, get you to go to sleep kind of stuff.
Yeah. And in that vein, we do publish a summary of our results never mind, I won't get into the new, yes, in the newspaper. We'll just leave it at that.
Media.
And there's also a statistical report that goes to DCD that is also available to the public. If they want to go to the DCD website, they can search and find those reports there.
Right. And just a quick note on that, DCED's deadline for the filing and posting of that information is April 1st, and I believe that ours was actually filed several days in advance of that deadline, so.
Yeah, the DCED report is purely statistical. It doesn't have the footnotes. It doesn't have, a lot of the extra reporting and verbiage and tying out numbers and details and those kinds of things that the GAAP financial statements have.
Yeah, and in addition to our legal ads, once it is approved and finalized, it gets posted to the website as well.
Okay. Any other questions? Comments? How about a motion?
Mr. Chair, I move that council accept the 2023 audit from the Fidelity firm with the corrections as noted that we saw this evening, and then once finalized, published to the required sites.
A second.
And a second. Discussion? Questions on the motion? All right, all in favor of the motion signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries unanimously. Joe, thank you again. It's always a pleasure.
Thank you.
Thank you. Good to see you all.
Have a good night.
Okay, appreciate it. Bye.
All right, that takes us to plans, P1. However, before we introduce Mark and Ed, the chair would like to note that item number NB2 will immediately follow P1 in the agenda, so just a heads up. So with that, we'll go to item P1, our one and only plan on tonight's agenda, Shiloh Commercial Park Preliminary Subdivision Plan, tax parcel 19002B065A, that's too much, 1764 East Trout Road, State College. This is an action item, however, before I entertain a motion, I believe Mark probably has an update on the sketch plan that we saw,
Yes.
right?
Yes, good evening. I'm Mark Toretti with Pentair Engineering, and also here is my client, Ed Maxwell, who is the owner of the property and developing the subdivision. Yeah, we were in front of you basically with the concept sketch plan of this subdivision several months ago, and we're now moving forward with the preliminary subdivision. And one thing that's gone through the process separately through staff approval is a lot consolidation plan of 2 of the existing parcels. And so that's going parallel with this, and but that's just the staff approval with it. So once that's consolidated, then we're going to subdivide the property, and I'll explain a little bit about that. Maybe, I'm not sure if this will reach, or actually I like just taking the mic and going this way.
You're an old pro here, Mark. so-
Yeah. I'll outline in the entire red here and over this area here. That is the property that we're talking about, that we're looking at subdividing into a commercial park. Ed's current Maxwell Trucking and Excavating office is right here at the intersection of Shallow Road and Patty Corner from Trout Road. And then I think George Cavell is right on the other side of the existing shared driveway there. What we're proposing is very similar in some ways to our sketch plan, is a commercial subdivision. We're looking at 7 lots for it, and they vary in size from a little over, it's like 1.3 acres to smaller ones, up to over 5.2 acres for the biggest one, which is lot 7 in the back. We're going to subdivide this or construct it into 2 phases. Looking at the first phase, which is this area here, and it'll include just the first 3 lots of this development. The road entrance, basically it'll be East Trout Road, which will be opposite of Trout Road. We'll come in, enter, we'll have a temporary cul-de-sac here, and then a shared driveway, Kelly Lane, that will come up there and be used by these 3 properties for their access. And then phase 2 will be the rest of the road continued on up to a cul-de-sac, and lots 4, 5, and 6, and 7 will be constructed then on there. And also at that time, we are also offering for dedication additional right-of-way to connect to the Clara property in the future, if that connection is ever needed, so that that could be made. So that's kind of the big picture as far as what is going on with the subdivision itself. And some of the other items as we get into it here, if you scroll to so we can show the upper part of it there. What we're doing also, probably the biggest change from whenever we presented this, is Ed has negotiated with the Clare family on their property, which is north of the site. And actually this is the section that is in Benner Township, to actually be able to use part of their property for a stormwater basin for this development, so that this would take care of all of the stormwater for the roadway and also for the development of the lots on the project. Some of the issues I know is beneficial because this is outside of the wellhead protection area, and it's in Benner Township, but it makes it a little more easier trying to do stormwater on the wellhead protection. It is a worthy goal in trying to minimize the impact of the pollution of the wellhead area. But it's also very difficult with regards to the having line basins and meeting DEP's criteria. And along with this, we're able to put everything in one basin over there in the Clare property. And along with that, the area that is still within College Township, we are going to be running gravity sewer service up along the front of Shallow Road to be able to have him gravity sewer part of the Clare property in the future. So that was kind of the trade-off between the 2 property owners, kind of a win-win for both of them on that. Other things specifically, water will be coming off of Shallow Road and up through the site. Sanitary sewer, like we said, is actually going to be running along Shallow Road, and we'll be coming off laterals for each one of those lots that are there for phase 1. Phase 2 will actually the sanitary sewer service will be coming from a different location and serve those lots. So it worked out well with regards to where we're phasing it and the impact of being able to provide sewer service. We have met with the Township Water Authority and their hydrologist at the start of this project, who's looking at some of this and looking at the earth moving, and we were getting into having some really deep utilities. We were talking about blasting, and there were some concerns from the water authority with regards to that. We went back, adjusted our design to minimize the depths that we are going to be working at, where they will not need to be blasting for the construction. There'll be a lot of rock that'll be just hammering it out, but we've kind of raised up the utilities, and this scenario helped a lot with what we were doing there for that. So that was part of coordinating with the water authority from that end of it. A couple other things, sidewalk wise, we are having sidewalks on both sides of our roadway up on East Trout Road, and also from Ed's property here up along there, and also on one side of the shared driveway entrance there, and also up along Shallow Road. That sidewalk will also be built too on that end of it. And then from our concepts from the staff on the comments from on the concept plan, right now we're showing like a temporary sidewalk or pedestrian connection. Right now it would be just a gravel path that'll connect over to the feeder property line. We can't go onto their property. And then ultimately, whenever Lot 5 is developed through that land development plan, they will do a better connection based upon how that site will be laid out and provide a connection. So there is a note on the plan that must be provided also. Part of the other thing which we met with staff this week on is the traffic study and the traffic impact for this subdivision. Right now, we have a traffic study that has studied the whole development, all 7 lots, and a traffic signal and some improvements are required based upon that. Right now, we are looking at, the plan actually in our notes has that then a traffic signal is planned for this intersection. And right now, the notes had it about, before any of these lots get occupancy, that the traffic signal must be constructed and installed at that point in time. Since then, some items have been occurring with regards to Shallow Road. Shallow Road, there's a lot of interest in some of the other properties further on up going towards I-99, and through private developers, they are looking at a study and working with PennDOT, a full traffic study of the full build out of those other properties, and they've been talking to PennDOT and maybe looking at some grant funding possibly, or a PennDOT corridor improvement project for this whole area, looking at it as one big thing rather than piecemealing it. So that's occurring in the background at this point in time. We don't know, the study has not even been started yet. They are just determining the scope of the traffic study, but where we're at now, and I think we've met with staff and we wanted to revise the note. I'm not sure if it made it to their packet or not with regards to saying that the signal will be provided, but also providing a deferral or an exemption or deferral. Potentially, one is if any of the lots when it's first developed may not, if it would not trigger a traffic signal, that possibly upon PennDOT's approval and then the townships, that maybe the signal could be deferred. Right now, from our meeting yesterday, talking to the township's traffic engineer and our traffic engineer, that may be unlikely because of the amount of traffic on Shallow Road, that anything there may end up triggering a traffic signal. So we don't know exactly what that is, but it sounds like we can't come in and say this development will not trigger one, because there is quite a bit of traffic out there in Shallow Road that is impacting that. At the same time, if my client, if Ed looks at, gets this development, he's looking at, or he's not, but a group is interested in developing Lot 3 as a hotel, and those plans hopefully will be coming in the next few months, that would trigger the signal, and Ed would go to look to install it. But then we get to this overall study of Shallow Road, that may require more improvements that would be needed compared to what is needed for just Ed and installing a signal and some lane improvements for the hotel. Like say for this whole build out may require a decel lane and an extension of the center turn lane. And so Ed could possibly just build a signal. At the same time, this Shiloh Road corridor study could say, hey, you need a 5-lane road there. And so, would Ed have to build the 2 lanes and then ultimately tear it out, tear work out that, will be coming in the future. So that note and that deferral just gave us a leeway to get more answers from PennDOT for the rest of Shiloh Road. I think in everybody's best interest, we want to work to do what's right, but also from Ed's interest that still minimize his costs, but at the same time works with what else is being planned there. So that's kind of our note regarding the exemption and deferral for, I think, 18 months is what we put it there. And it's all subject to PennDOT's approvals also. That in general is kind of an overall summary. Like I says, most of you, I think, have seen this plan before, the concept plan. It's just a little bit of upgrades. And if you have any questions, I can answer them.
Adam, anything to add, or Mike, or Don?
No, Mark is correct. We worked on crafting some potential language for the council's consideration relative to the notes or the conditions for notes on this plan just the other day. And essentially what I think we've arrived at is something that provides first some flexibility for the developer. It's a situation where it's understood that if development occurs and triggers a signal, the signal needs to go in. The developer seems to be willing to do that. On the other hand, from a township perspective, it actually makes some sense that if there is a potential for some coordination activity here, and PennDOT is clearly involved and approves of this, then there's a potential for a deferral of that signal going in that PennDOT is actively aware and engaged in. It makes some sense to try to slow the process down just enough to allow all of that to occur at one time, as opposed to, as Mark had indicated, the developer here putting that in and then having it be taken out months later. So that was kind of the impetus behind the note that was modified that was on your motion sheet.
Are we talking item number 10?
Correct.
Okay. Under the potential motion. Okay, anything else then?
Nothing for me.
All right, questions for Mark, Tracy, on what's being presented? Rich?
No.
None? When does that ever happen? Well, I gotta ask a few then.
I figured that.
We saved it for you.
And these are more rhetorical
Yeah.
questions for anybody who might be paying attention. The entire site is zoned, the same zoning district.
Commercial, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I thought I heard you say it was gonna be subdivided to commercial or something, but it's all commercial.
Yes.
Yeah. And as far as the proposed roads, and we covered this at the sketch plan, is consistent with anything that we might, or not inconsistent with anything we might be showing on the official map, or at least thinking about, so we're good there. The off-site stormwater, that's the one thing that didn't get floated during the sketch plan, the biggest thing probably.
Yeah.
And the sidewalk along Shiloh.
Yeah.
There was some discussion about that, and I'm assuming that's fine? I mean, there's no issues with staff? I mean, there's no issues with long-term maintenance and the fact that it's, I understand by the way, the ARC is the wellhead protection, right?
Yes,
on the map. So it gets you outside that, simplifies the process, at least.
Yeah.
Makes it a little less expensive, maybe, and cumbersome to deal with the stormwater.
Yeah, and your staff, your engineers, they are pretty good with regards to, we execute a declaration of stormwater access and maintenance
Okay.
easement agreement. And with that, like making sure that the parties, both parties will be involved with that, with this declares, because it's their land.
Yeah.
And Ed, it'll ultimately will have a separate property owner's agreement for the maintenance, because when this lot's all developed and he's gone, the property owners will be responsible for that basin. So there's also a separate agreement that'll be prepared for them to say that they're responsible and how that will be broken out between them. So, and that's something that your town engineers have been asking about, to make sure that's covered, similar to what we did at the Stalker Chevrolet Auto Body Shop basin. That's shared by numerous parties, and to make sure it's covered for the DSAM at the same time, for the property owners themselves are aware of the maintenance responsibilities and their share of the cost.
Okay, so there's a mechanism in place similar to one we've used before. Staff's comfortable with it? Okay. And regarding item number 10, yeah, I think that makes sense. I mean, that's always our challenge, is, how do we be fair to people who develop, not the last guy in kind of a deal. Yeah. The note or the process will account for, let's say the development doesn't happen for 10 years, we would have a mechanism to get the improvement that could be torn up 10 years from now. But I mean, we have to find some number in there where it has to go in at some point. And that has been already determined, or that?
Well, that's a staff suggestion. The developer had suggested 2 years, staff had reduced that to 18 months. It really is a number that the council ultimately is comfortable with.
Okay, and the 18 months is the result of the PennDOT study and recommendation, or the actual next piece of development triggering the need?
To be determined,
Yeah,
because
okay.
we are.
So it's open-ended.
We are uncertain.
We're just basically acting tonight to give the leeway on the deferral.
Yes, and I think, once the study is done on the whole corridor, a lot of our answers will be known, and then that we'll have a better idea, I think, how to approach this. I think Ed's been pretty cooperative in working with the township, to do the right thing. And also looking from his interest of it too, that ways that it would maybe, with some sharing with some of the other development, could maybe minimize his costs. So, but right now it's all unknown, because that study hasn't started yet.
Sounds like good planning to me, doesn't it? Maybe, could be. Is that a stretch? All right, if there aren't any questions, then the chair will entertain a motion. Now, before we do that, the stormwater, if we approve the subdivision as presented here, are we locking into that stormwater situation at this point? I mean, we don't usually do that in a
That's a yes.
subdivision, do we? We are at this point?
And it will be there, yes.
Yeah, it will be there. I mean, this is a preliminary plan too. We'll be following up and submitting a final plan very shortly for phase 1.
Right, but this will be the last shot at the subdivision action. And that
Overall,
puts-
yeah.
That puts that in there.
Yes.
Okay. Motion? There's only 2 choices here, so.
I got the cheat sheet. Mr. Chair, I recommend council approve the Shiloh Commercial Park preliminary subdivision plan dated March 18, 2024, and last revised April 15, 2024, subject to the following conditions. within 90 days from the date of approval by council. All conditions must be satisfied and final signatures must be obtained. Failure to meet the 90-day requirement will render the plan null and void. 2, pay all outstanding review fees. 3, address to the satisfaction of the township engineer any outstanding plan review comments from staff. 4, provide an intent to serve letter from the University Area Joint Authority. 5, provide an intent to serve letter from College Township Water Authority. 6, provide a proof of PennDOT highway occupancy permit prior to occupancy. 7, provide proof of an MPDES approval. Number 8, provide a draft declaration of stormwater access and maintenance for approval to be recorded with the development of individual lots. 9, provide a draft shared access and maintenance agreement for lots 1, 2, and 3. For 10, modify note 26 on the plan to read, a traffic signal and associated lane improvements are proposed at the intersection of Shiloh Road and Trout Road as part of the Shiloh Road and Trout Road, looks, I got a double there, of the Shiloh Commercial Park development based on the approved traffic impact study for the subdivision. These proposed improvements must be installed prior to any certificates of occupancy being granted for any proposed land development on proposed Shiloh Commercial Park lots 1 to 7. Pedestrian crossings required by College Township and PennDOT at this intersection will be shown on the highway occupancy permit and traffic signal design plans. These above requirements are subject to any full or partial deferral of improvements that PennDOT may accept due to 1, improvements not being warranted by the initial development of lots in the subdivision, and or 2, the improvements are to be installed later as part of a larger PennDOT coordinated Shiloh Road corridor upgrade project. This exception for deferral shall be for no longer than 18 months from the initial occupancy of any proposed lot within the subdivision. And finally, all conditions must be accepted in writing within 7 days from the date of the conditional approval letter from the township engineer.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
Okay. Any questions or comments, discussion needed on the motion? I have one. You've heard of the 18 months prior to the
Yeah.
motion tonight?
Yes.
Okay, you're aware of that?
Yeah.
Okay. No other questions on the motion? All right, all in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Mark.
Thank you.
Ed? That concludes item number P1, that includes P1, which was our only plan tonight, and as noted before moving into reports, we are now going to go to our second item under new business, NB2, the CATA local match, discussion and potential action, resolution R-24. Is that referring to a resolution?
There is a
R-24-22 in the
Yes.
agenda? No.
Oh, well, yeah, actually, yeah,
There's an-
that's local shares
Right.
resolution.
Okay. Anyways, it's NB2 CATA local match, R-24-22, discussion on the determined CATA local match for the next CATA fiscal year, correct?
That is correct.
So this is potential action item. However, before I consider action, we do have a number of items in our agenda tonight outlining the background on the CATA local match, the new formula used for local match, and some service highlights. I assume we have someone from CATA who's going to share some more detail with us. Dave, would that be you?
Yes. Chair, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the opportunity to chat with you tonight. Wanted to give you a little bit of background on what's been going on at CATA this past year. I'm Dave Rischel, Executive Director, and it's first that I had a chance to talk with you last year. I was trying to think why we weren't here last year. I think I had just started and this needed to get passed, and I think Eric, you and Adam took care of last year's resolution. But this year we want to talk to you about the year past. Next slide, please.
Sorry about that. Doesn't want to move.
In a nutshell, we have a slide with our proposed FY 24-25 budget. We're on a July 1 to June 30 budget year. Our overall budget is 26.2 million, and that's actually $500,000 almost less than last year. And got a revenue breakdown. Happy to answer any questions about this. One of the things, if you paid attention last year, you would notice our Go hourly service is up significantly. It was about just under $70 an hour last year. This year it's 119. That's because of some of the services that we are curtailing in Spring Township and Bellefonte and Benner Township. And the contractor we have has overhead costs and variable costs, and the reduction in hours has made their hourly rate go up temporarily. As we add more service, that'll come down. Next slide. A few highlights for this past year. We, of course, implemented our new service changes in the fall, as we always do. We also implemented a new microtransit, our Go software platform. There's this service we now use called VIA. It's a handheld device, and it's given a lot more capabilities to people using that service. And that'll be very relevant to your township this year, because one of our proposals is to add significant Go service area to the township, but I'm getting ahead of myself. We also had to make some changes in January. This is something that we don't typically do, but we've been struggling with getting enough drivers since COVID and continue to struggle. And we quite frankly had more service out there than we could comfortably handle, so we made some adjustments in January, got service under control so that we didn't have to spend so much overtime and have so many people trying to cover routes. That dramatically improved things, and we really experienced very little loss of service. In fact, ridership had pretty much all recovered by the end of the spring. We also have done something that, Eric, maybe you can say. I'm not sure if CAT has ever done this before, but we have a new summer route that we are doing, a summer-only route. This replaces some of the service that we curtail because the university doesn't provide as much loop service in the summer, but it is a route that goes up College Avenue to Blue Course, then over to Westerly Parkway, down the Parkway to Pew Street, and then back into town. This was implemented really as part of our summer youth pass program, so that young people could access the pool and other activities along that corridor. And to our surprise and delight, in the first week of service, we are averaging more than 70 trips a day, or 70 passengers a day on that route, so we're pretty happy with it. It's going to run throughout the summer from 8 a.m. to 9 p.m., 7 days a week. We also, we've done something new with regard to our service changes. I think we may have done this in the past, but not recently. As CATA is looking at our services and considering how to make changes and improvements, we're reaching out to you and to all the member municipalities before we suggest the changes. Lori Miller, who's with me today, her and her staff met with Lindsay, your planner here, to talk about the ideas we had for College Township, and that feedback was very useful, and it's really helped us to develop some service ideas that are more in line with what you're looking for. So we intend to continue that in years, just more ongoing dialogue throughout the year. Next slide, please. A few other things here. I won't read all of these directly, but one I will highlight. Tomorrow is actually CATA's 50th anniversary. So we have been around for 50 years as of tomorrow. And on Monday, you are all invited, if you haven't heard about this before. We are having a 50th anniversary celebration at our headquarters. There is a 9 o'clock kind of press media event, and then throughout the day we'll have different activities. One of the things you can do if you're interested is you can ride a restored GMC Transit coach, our bus number 1 that was here from way back. Our maintenance staff have remarkably restored that bus. So we can't put it in revenue service, but it's going to be available, you know, just get on and do little rides. So please come out for that. Some giveaways for that as well. And we've also, the last item on that list is we've been working with our legislators to support the governor's proposal to significantly increase transit funding. Under the governor's proposal, if he gets exactly what he's asked for, we could get up to $4 million more for transit in the center region. We're pretty sure that's not going to happen, but we're also pretty sure we're going to get something. So we're watching that, and we'll probably know later in the summer or early fall what finally gets passed. Next slide, please. So a couple of service change highlights that affect College Township. The biggest is that after quite a wait, CAT is in a position to implement GO service throughout the township. That yellow area is going to be the College Township GO zone. It's a few of the communities that we're going to be serving. And one of the things that we think will be very popular with passengers is that anyone who's going to the university, we're going to be connecting the campus at Medler Field. So passengers will be able to take a GO ride anywhere in this area, connect there, or connect to our buses. One thing that's not mentioned on this is the trade-off kind of with this is our current College Avenue connector kind of jigs through Lamont, and we've really had very low ridership on that little segment. So we're going to curtail that and just keep the College Avenue connector on College Avenue. That's actually going to help us have more frequent and faster service, so it'll improve the service to the passengers that are using the route. So we think that's a pretty good trade-off. Next slide, please. Yeah, next slide. Somehow we got the wrong, yeah, you can pop through these. We must have sent you the wrong.
It's everybody.
Just an overview of everyone.
Yeah. This is
you
from
want
earlier.
That may be my mistake. I know we had a couple
We have another one.
updates. Is it on the other one?
We have two.
Let's,
Once
yeah,
we're through.
unless, is all of this, I know that these aren't specifically relevant to College Township.
I'm happy to go through them all if you'd like.
No, it's okay.
No,
Okay.
But can you get to where you need to be if we get through?
Yes, just keep
Okay.
going through.
All right.
Yeah, actually, go back one.
Okay.
One more. There we go. So as we put Catago here in College Township and we have a connection to the campus through Medler Field, we're doing that as a pilot, and we're also doing two other similar pilots where people from passengers from Catago regions can also, instead of just, for example, Harris Township, if you want to go downtown, you have to take Catago to Hills Plaza, get on one of our fixed route buses and ride into town. For people who want to go directly into town, that option is going to be available. So we're piloting that. That again is because of some increased demand. We want to watch our demand for that service carefully. So we're definitely labeling it as a pilot. Next slide. Next slide. I just want to update you on the local match process. In the past, there was a somewhat complex formula that was used to figure out the proportioning of local match. And it was mostly based on fixed route bus only. It didn't really account for paratransit, Arcata ride service, or microtransit, Arcata go service. So we looked at how are other systems doing this and how do other government programs work where there's this kind of local match requirement. And overwhelmingly the response was it's population based. So we modeled that, and the way we did it in very simple shorthand is we relied on the MPO for the population numbers. The population residents on the campus are part of Penn State's contribution, so they're not part of State College, or you guys have a few. So they are out of your numbers. So then the remaining numbers for the 5 municipalities, we just took what is your proportional population. And we will revisit that as the MPO advises us that we should, if necessary. And I think there was a consensus among the local managers that this was a more fair and reasonable way to apportion it. Because the question of who benefits from CATA is passengers, of course, but it's also everybody. We take cars off the road, we save a lot of CO2 emissions, so there's really a benefit to the whole region, whether you ride the service or not. So we were very pleased that there was a consensus on this. And next slide. And just kind of a reminder for the local match, really for every dollar we get from you, we get, that kind of frees up or releases $26.10 of other funding and other financial sources. So it's a good investment in terms of what you get back or what we get back from this. Next slide. And we get to our ask. We are requesting that College Township provide a local match of $72,952 in operating assistance match and $8,316 in capital match. That's based on the fact that you have an 11% population for the region. And as a reminder, the state asks for a 15% match, and this is an 8.7% match. So we're far below what the state is asking for, but it's a slight increase over past years. And we would appreciate your consideration of that.
As one of the managers who was part of this discussion, does he have anything to add in regards to the local match? And then we'll go to Lindsay. We won't go to Lindsay, but.
No. The only thing that I will say is that we met on multiple occasions to discuss formulas, and we're somewhat all over the place, but in the end, I think that reason prevailed. Population really is the best way to perform this particular calculation. I will note that, as is always the case, there are winners and losers, and in terms of either increases or decreases in contributions, the borough, who has already taken action and approved their match for the coming fiscal year, ended up with a significant increase. But again, I think it speaks to the value of CATA services and the importance of CATA services and what is delivered here to the community overall, why that was so important for the borough to consider. And so I'm pleased. We're kind of where we've been, to be honest. This is not a significant up or down movement for College Township, and even at a higher percentage level. So from my perspective, I think this is an appropriate ask for College Township, and I think it's an appropriate way to calculate the overall requirement.
And I do apologize, the resolution was not in your package.
Yeah, that was-
So I had it in my file, it just didn't get added to NBT.
But we have it
So
here
I
on-
hope now I'm doubting myself, I hope the numbers are correct. Do they look correct?
Totals look right.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Yes.
Perfect. 'Cause I
That's
didn't-
operating, right? It was
Operating in capital. The paragraph at the bottom is the capital.
Says, in addition, can you scroll down?
I'm
So
sorry, yes.
we have two resolutions, or,
One
It's all
resolution.
in the same.
Yeah, captures both.
One and the same.
okay. So the 18 quarterly is both for the operational and the capital together?
Right, the 18 quarterly is for your operations, and then there's an amount there, $8,316, that is referenced, that is the capital.
All right, so it's just not broken down into quarterly payments?
That is correct.
Correct. We can do that for you.
Okay. All right, if there aren't further staff comments, let's go to council. Tracy, anything on what you've heard, either local share-wise or, actually, let's do local share. You on neither?
Neither.
Okay. Let's go with the local share first. Let's go to our finance committee rep. Questions or comments on this local share? That where has it been in all my years? I had to deal with that, all those complicated ones, and now we finally have one that's not complicated.
I will share that at the last finance meeting, I threw out the Miller formula as an example of something, so, yeah. If we could we go back to page 25?
Oh, wait.
It's
I'll
the
stop.
colored one with the local match.
1 second there, Rich. 25, you said.
Yeah, that's how it shows up in ours, but it's the, yes, thanks. So I was trying to figure out the math on here. So the 2610, is that a reflective of all three? The yellow, green, and lighter green?
Yes.
Okay, I didn't quite come up with the same numbers.
Not add up?
And then in the federal subsidy, if you look, that's a 55 million, the apostrophe is in the wrong spot, so. But
Extra two.
in general, I think this slide needs to be looked at.
Thank you.
I wasn't getting any of the numbers
Yeah.
that you were coming through
30.
with there. But with regard to the simplification of the local match, I think that's excellent. It's something we've been talking about in COG Finance, you know, how do we make this more simpler, more digestible and everything like that. So I don't think that doesn't impact our decision. That's a whole separate, but just if you have some presentations after us, you might want to take a look at that.
Yes, thank you. Somehow, either on our end or whatever, this is the wrong version of the
Sure,
PowerPoint deck,
sure.
so.
But it's pretty clear cut. I think the number that just in state and federal, it was $20 per every dollar we put in. We don't get many deals like that.
It's a good deal.
In our work. So that's good work if you can have it. So that's all I have, Mr. Chair.
Okay, on the local match, yeah, I just want to echo, thank you to the managers and to the borough for taking the first. Have you been to the borough yet, or we just
Yes.
heard that they took
The
that?
borough was the first.
Okay,
They did have, theirs doubled, actually. They went from 150,000 to 300,000.
well, and, you know, I cringe when I hear the term there are winners and losers, you know, and I know that's just in the transition phase.
Correct.
Because what we just heard was, the reason we're going to population-based is everybody's a winner. You know, whether you ride or not.
That's true.
You know, your property value, there's all kinds of things. We have all kinds of services that we subsidize that I hope I never use, but I have no problem at all paying for it. All right, then, it's not really our role here when it comes to the service changes, but since you presented those to us, I would open the floor up for any comments or questions on the service changes. First to staff, Adam, did you have anything?
Yeah, other than I'm very pleased and excited about the expansion of Catago service to the College Township community. It's something that has been now around and available to our outlying municipalities here from College Township, and it's great to see that service is now going to be available for our own residents. And I think it will actually serve a very real need that we have. Service once again, being restored through Catago to Houserville.
Houserville area.
You know, I think, and that's going to be greatly appreciated by a number of folks. I also think, by the way, the summer route is a wonderful idea, and I hope that continues to be very successful.
Okay. Rich, anything on service changes?
No, I think Adam touched it. I know when they first took out the route out of Houserville, that was a lot of angst about that. And so getting Catago in there to backfill that need is appreciated.
Tracy?
Nope, just.
Okay. Yeah, just a couple things. What Adam said, you looked at me when you asked about the summer route. Yeah, that out of those 50 years, I was there for 35 of them, and CATA had never put out a route that ran just during the summer. You know, versions of routes that ran year-round, you know, adjusted versions, but not a standalone, which is what I understand that this is.
Yeah.
Will run and then it will end when the fall semester starts back up.
Yeah, it started when we went to summer service, so at the end of classes 2 weeks ago, week and a half ago, and it will run until we go back to full service late August, so.
And there's two more things. Bravo to the outreach. you said you met with staff ahead of time. Not necessarily required, because standalone authority. We have a board member who actually should probably be here tonight, but that was sorely missed for several years, as you know, and as Lori knows, and it goes a long way.
Thank you. And it's on our end too. It's good to talk with you so we can reach out, but we also learn a lot when we do it. So it's a two-way street.
Yeah, CATA made it for 50 years very successfully on the backs of a lot of that one-on-one outreach stuff. And I know it's a data-driven world, but there's still room for that. And then lastly, the CATA Go service hours, I didn't see that in the presentation for the new College Township. I saw the map, but I didn't see any reference to the hours it will operate.
I'm not sure, do you know them off the top of your head?
Memory searching right there, the 8 a.m. to 9 p.m.
Okay. Since Lori spoke, maybe you could introduce Lori, because I suspect she'll be someone who will be interacting with staff in the future.
Absolutely.
I'll put you on the spot here.
Lori Miller, she is our Director of Business Development, and I always get the last part. Community Engagement.
Okay.
10-cent title there.
And she said, is regarding the CATA Go service hours? I didn't quite.
8 a.m. to 9 p.m. I think it may actually be a little bit earlier. We'll follow up specifically with those. It's at least those hours.
Is that 5 days a week, 6 days a week?
6 days a week.
Monday through Saturday?
Yes.
Okay. And as part of that, are there any gaps where that service connects to Medlar Field and there isn't any campus service from Medlar Field connecting beyond?
There should not be, no.
Okay, I know there shouldn't be.
Yeah.
That's why I'm asking.
If things are running normally, no, there are no
Okay,
gaps.
so as far as what's scheduled, there'll always be some kind of campus connection
Yes.
there to make.
And
at
I'll
Medlar.
add to that, one of the things about the new VIA app that we use for CATA Go, it's not working yet, but we're going to be able to use a data feed that we're now required to use by the federal government, that app can use, so it knows where our fixed route buses are. So if you want to connect to a fixed route bus, the app will help you plan and schedule your trip, your pickup time, so you meet that bus. That's something our old app didn't do.
No, that's really good stuff. And then lastly, boy, the Lamont thing, I just want to prepare you. I know it may look good on paper, you know, moving the fixed route service out of Lamont, but that fixed route service through Lamont is about as old as CATA. And I know it, you talk to staff about it, and maybe the data doesn't necessarily meet certain criteria, but that's a sensitive subject.
Okay?
And I would encourage some outreach. I know you've already done that. Expect some feedback, pushback even. So I'm suggesting that you prepare something, and this is, I think, a comment at the level, at our level, at a council level, to help mitigate that. Because the portion you're going to be traveling on College Avenue and not going through Lamont, it's a dead zone. I mean, there are no destinations there. I mean, you're not gaining anything other than maybe a minute or two in travel. So you need to be prepared to answer those kinds of questions and respond accordingly. Because in the eyes of many, that's not a, you know, that trade-off doesn't work for them.
I appreciate that.
You know, there's history there. The township just invested significant resources in upgrading the fixed route stops there, which maybe be used for CATA Go. But I'm just giving you a heads up.
I just wanted to address that. We just had a conversation today to have some community outreach meetings, particularly in your area, to talk about the new CATA Go zone.
Okay.
So that is on our list to do and should be happening before the kickoff of the new CATA Go zone.
Okay. And then, by the way, that's Lori Miller. Hang on, Matt.
On this topic, bear in mind, and this is for everyone, that Phase 3 of the Pike Street project will actually be commencing this summer. and Dawn can speak to some of the particulars, but the likelihood was going to be in 2024 that there were going to need to be adjustments to the fixed service regardless, given the construction that was going to be occurring on Pike Street. So Dawn has had some experience with that in our Phase 2 project and working with CATA, and the basic route of travel is going to be one way from Elm Street through to College Avenue.
Exactly what we did 2 years ago.
And so on that basis, just as a reminder, I would agree absolutely with your comments, Eric. The only thing I wanted to point out is 2024 is going to be different, almost regardless.
And I wasn't going to go this deep into that, but since Adam brought it up, I have to point out that if the data that was looked at and the decision was using recent data, it's a bit skewed because the past for 2 whole summers, the CATA service through Lamont was skewed. Well, we just heard it, we were going through there in one direction only, or CATA was going through there in one direction only. So I would suggest, maybe you've already done this, is to take a longer look at the ridership data and not that flawed sample size of just the past couple years when basically Lamont was closed.
And to also put this in perspective, because I appreciate what you're saying very much, we are still struggling significantly with driver shortages. And some of this was a trade-off question of where do we know we have riders and how can we optimize service to serve those riders, and the data that we looked at didn't support that as a vital segment, but that doesn't mean that we couldn't revisit it in the future as we get more drivers and we can increase the frequency. We actually have plenty of equipment. Since COVID, because we've had service cutbacks, we have more buses than we have drivers. So as we get drivers, there are a number of things we'd like to bring back, and this would certainly be something we'd want to take a look at. We also do have an upcoming public hearing, because all of our service changes at this point are proposed service changes. We're getting through our budgeting process. Actually, our board meets on Monday to approve our preliminary budget, which will then come to all the municipalities for review. And at that point, we can say that these are service changes we want to take out to the public and have public hearings, which is what we're required to do. So we'll be getting additional feedback. I very much appreciate your heads up.
I'm just trying to prepare you.
Thank you very much.
All right, any other questions for Dave or Lori? If not, we are in a position where we can take action to approve the resolution that flashed up there on the screen. And I think the resolution number is accurate in the agenda, right?
It is, yes. Do you want me to put it back up?
Yeah, can you put that up for us?
Let me grab it one more time. Sorry.
So if council is satisfied, then the chair will entertain a motion to adopt resolution R-24-22, which will authorize the requested CATA, College Township local shares for CATA, both operating and capital, for fiscal year 2024, 2025. Do I have such a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
Thank you. Question or discussion on the motion? Are we accurate enough there with the motion?
You are, it's
Okay.
fine.
All in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Thank you, Dave. Thank you, Lori. He's not
Thank you
leaving
very
yet.
much.
Not quite yet. If
Okay.
you want to take a quick look there,
But wait.
there's
Wait,
more.
there's more.
Ah, I didn't know this was coming.
Nor did I.
I told you about it.
Yeah, well, you did, yes, I'm sorry.
I like surprises. We're nimble, right?
I didn't want to mail it.
All right, before me tonight, I have a proclamation. Proclamation P-24-03 that I'm going to read. College Township Center County, Pennsylvania, Proclamation P-24-03, a proclamation honoring Center Area Transportation Authority's 50th anniversary. Whereas Center Area Transportation Authority, CATA, has been an integral part of our community for half a century, providing essential transportation services to residents and visitors, and whereas CATA's commitment to sustainability, accessibility, and efficiency has contributed significantly to the well-being of our region, and whereas CATA's orange and white buses have become iconic symbols of the center region, connecting neighborhoods, campuses, and beyond, and whereas CATA's growth from its humble beginnings in 1974 to its current status as a joint municipal authority reflects its resilience and adaptability, and whereas CATA's dedication to serving Penn State University students, faculty, and staff has fostered a strong partnership between the university and the community, and whereas CATA's Park and Ride program, paratransit services, and innovative routes have enhanced mobility options for all, now therefore it be proclaimed the College Township Council, in conjunction with the surrounding townships and boroughs, hereby celebrate and honor CATA's 50th anniversary on May 17th, 2024. Further proclaimed, the College Township Council commends CATA staff, drivers, and the leadership for their unwavering commitment to excellence and their role in shaping our vibrant community. This proclamation authorized this second day of May 2024 by the College Township Council, Center County, Pennsylvania. College Township Council, signed Dustin Best, the chair. I'm the vice chair sitting in for Dustin tonight. Attested by our manager, Adam Broombaugh. So on behalf of College Township Council, I'd like to present this to Dave, his copy.
Yes,
Thank you, Dave.
absolutely.
And thank you all.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dave.
All right, that concludes NB2. Unfortunately, that doesn't move us to NB3. What it does is moves us back up to reports. Oh, that's right, Matt, I'm sorry. I didn't have his hand up. Anyways, first on the reports is manager's update. We
Yes.
have a manager's update in the packet. Anything to add beyond what's in there?
Only one item, and I'm actually very pleased to inform council that with the retirement of Mr. Bob Long as finance director after a little more than 24 and a half years, we have advertised the position, we have received applications, we have reviewed those applications, and we have interviewed applicants. And I do want to thank those individuals that participated on our interview committee. Mr. Rich Frank participated on behalf and representing College Township Council, Larry Pager, the finance director of Patton Township, Carrie Miller, our Economic Development Coordinator / IDA Executive Director, Mr. Mike Bloom, the Assistant Township Manager, and myself. And I'm very pleased to report that we had identified an excellent candidate, and we have solicited an offer to that candidate. And as of this moment, that recruitment seems to be going very well. And I will have more to report and follow up shortly. So I did want to make that announcement. And again, thank all the members of the interview committee for their participation. So.
Okay, questions for the manager on his report? No? No? All right. Thank you, Adam. That takes us to COG Regional, County, and Liaison reports. To my knowledge, with the help of Jen, I've identified 5 COG meetings that have happened since our last meeting, and let's go in reverse chronological order. That was May 15th, most recently was the Spring Creek Watershed Commission report, which I don't believe we have a report, do we? No.
No, we do not.
And we then, the same day, we had the College Township Industrial Development Authority report, which Susan did provide a written report in our packet. Any questions, comments, concerns on
I think she
Susan's
just
report?
gave the facility, or public safety, not the IDA.
Oh, I'm sorry, that's the public, okay.
She did not provide that one.
All right, so let's go to the day before, public safety. That was her report that just came in the other day on public safety. I'll just make a note, there's a written report in our packet for that meeting. And then prior to that was the Finance Committee meeting, which Rich attended on May 9th. Anything to report? Anything to share with us?
We really didn't do much. Just kidding.
Yeah, that'd be a first.
Yeah. No, we had some in-depth things. We heard some preliminary feedback on the capital improvement plan roadshow as it's going out to municipalities. The first thing we heard was similar comments to what we had shared. Concern about the overall budget, but very conscientious discussions towards that, more so than I believe than previous years, so that's encouraging. We reviewed formulas for the annual budget of municipal shares. We're trying to be educational and transparent on those, while at the same time trying to reduce where possible, but end of the day, there really isn't, because COG has some a la carte nature on some of its programs, and those has to be accounted for, but we think we came up with some ways to communicate those better, and you'll see those, that would be the table A that we normally see in our detailed and summary budgets. Next, we moved on to a review about the budget guideline. There was the potential of a new format for that. The committee honed in, we're changing so much other, let's get this, last year was the first time with the current guideline format. We're gonna carry that forward. But the big element that comes into it is the cost of living adjustment, COLA methodology, and how that factors into the guideline. So our big thing was that HR had made a recommendation, and finance wholeheartedly supported that recommendation. So we should be seeing that, I believe, at the general forum.
Is that it? Questions for Rich?
No.
I don't have any either. A couple days before that, we had our COG committee, facilities committee meeting on the 7th. There was only 2 items on the agenda. One was our custodial services and building maintenance report, which was prepared by the COG senior intern, Don Frank, and it was an extraordinarily comprehensive overlook. I mean, very detailed, very comprehensive overlook of how custodial services are provided across all of the COG functions. And it was interesting, but it was not provided, it was provided mostly for context, because at the same meeting, we brought staff in and asked them for their comments. And what we heard from staff is, I think what many of us suspected all along, is there isn't an easy, A or B type solution. Either contract out custodial services across the board or bring them all in-house. Because what we heard from staff kind of reinforced what we all thought, was there's benefits in some areas to contracting it out. There'll be benefits in some areas to keeping it in-house or moving it in-house. And I think that makes it harder, but that's our job. Is to figure out the best mix and match of how to do this. I mean, the easy thing is say, we're just gonna look at numbers and we're just gonna contract it out. But, to use the library as an example, they use the borough staff. And it would be awfully hard to replicate the response time and skill set that comes with using the borough staff right next door for emergencies that seem to happen on a regular basis at the library, those kinds of things. So that was just one example of where, it may look good on paper to contract the service out, but how much, what type of value do you place on the quality of the service, the responsiveness, those kinds of things. So in the end, what we decided, we thought the information was great. And we thought that in general, we think a blended approach is probably where COG's going to end up, but that the new executive director, and in particular the new facilities manager who will come on board, needs to be part of that decision process. So it's good information, but it'll be good information that we turning around in our minds and with, again, more with staff, but more importantly with the new executive director and facilities manager. And that's when we would expect to actually take some action or make some recommendations in that area is once they're on board and up to speed. The second item we talked about was, it was actually an action item, was our long-range facilities plan proposal and presentation. I think I informed you that we were successful, thanks to, in large part, to a presentation that Rich saw at PML.
Yes.
Yeah. He identified a consulting firm that specializes in this at a very cost-effective rate, because that's what they do, at helping regions, municipalities develop long-range capital plans. So I worked with the vice chair and with the COG executive director to draft up a proposal, which we put before the Finance Committee and asked for action from them to recommend to General Forum that we engage this consulting firm at a not to exceed amount, which happens to be the amount that we have budgeted. In fact, the actual action was that the Facilities Committee recommended to the General Forum to authorize the executive director to execute the proposal from Kimmel Bogert Architects Incorporated to perform facilities planning services as outlined in their proposal, and at the expense for this project be funded from the committed fund balance building studies and the committed fund balance in the COG building budget. So that action, assuming that gets through COG exec, will likely be before us at General Forum at the end of the month, with my recommendation, obviously, and hopefully Dustin's at exec. Rich has been tangentially involved with this in a couple of different ways. But it's a good thing. It's something that's been needed for some time, and we were very fortunate, I believe, to have access to this service, this level of consulting service at this cost, at this time. So questions, comments, anything else on the facilities plan?
Just one, because it'll be seen in the executive committee. I don't know who's going to be attending that, but a little variation to the funding of the study.
Okay.
The facilities committee, when we first stood up, we got a pot of money for studies when we needed subject matter expertise on whatever.
So that's reference to the building studies line, the fund line.
Correct. So that was all funded, that was 100% funded by municipal contributions. So I had a discussion with the executive director that does not capture the role of our enterprise funds in that value, yet they are they're an incredibly important part of this whole study and everything. So there's been discussions that at a minimum code will be contributing a portion towards the study.
Okay, that's a good point, because they're part of the facilities.
Yep. Big part.
Big part of it.
Yeah. So I saw a draft of the exec agenda, and I think that's what's going to be presented to them, which we will see at the General Forum.
Good catch. Those are the kind of catches we like to catch, aren't they?
Yeah.
All right, anything else? If not, that will conclude COG regional, county, and liaison. That'll conclude COG regional reports. That would take us to our PC staff, PC, and other committee reports. We have, I know we have Matt here in the audience tonight. We also received a written report from Mr. Schulte. Actually, Dave, since you've stuck it out for an hour and a half, do you have anything you'd like to add or point to in your written report? If so, I'm gonna have to require you to come up to the podium. Does that change your opinion as to whether you have anything to add?
Very little. I would express my appreciation to staff for getting that to you. Okay, we had a meeting on Monday night, okay, and I typed it up on Tuesday morning, and the packet had already been published. Okay, so thank you for getting that to the council. If you have any questions?
Well, while you're up there, any questions for Dave on his report? Right.
No questions, just appreciated.
Yeah, and I will tell you, it went in the supplemental folder, and it's not uncommon for there to be as many documents in the supplemental folder as in the agenda itself, so. There's a way to get stuff to us that late, so. All right, but thanks.
Thank you.
And then next up would be Matt. Please tell us you have a report, because this is the highlight of the meeting, as you well know.
Well, we did the Shiloh commercial park thing. Second thing, I reported back about the attainable workforce housing. Needless to say, it wasn't greeted with much enthusiasm. People weren't real happy that we had no community input, or very little community input, after 7 meetings. So, like I say, I think we understand you folks are going to input, but maybe we just wondered where, and I'd said before, where the community input was, all those meetings. And now your favorite part. In 1933, President Roosevelt, in his first inaugural address at the highlight of the Great Depression, said, "Let me assert my firm belief that the only thing we have to fear is fear itself." Brings us to our next item, which is form-based code. We spent quite a bit of the meeting on form-based code, went through all the objectives. A couple things we're sort of asking your opinion of. Objective number 2 talks about good urbanization, or urbanism, I guess. And we didn't quite understand that. The definition of urbanism is a study of how inhabitants of urban areas interact with, and I wrote it in red, built environment. So we're going to be trying to project urbanism maybe without a built environment. But that's the thing. Objective number 10, DPC, as noted, hold the line on block structure. We were looking for maybe a little more clarification on that. And also, objective number 13, maybe the administrative approval should be listed as objectives, and the zoning review and conditional use stuff should maybe come first before we proceed on that. We also were sort of confused as the wording for the town center. Once again, we really not sure whether we have a town center yet. So we're sort of trying to project out that. And I think Mike has some stuff to share for Lindsay, or?
Most of my stuff is actually more towards the attainable housing discussion, so I think that'll help.
I skipped over you, I'm sorry.
No, and you're perfectly fine there, Matt. In terms of this, honestly, I don't have anything directly on form-based to share, so I'd actually turn it over to council and help where I can.
And one of the things too is we got talking about the meetings and the checkpoints and all that stuff, and probably realized that we really don't know too well what's going to happen. I mean, we may need several group meetings, we may need just 1 or 2, and as far as the progress made, some things that we have 1 block for might take 2 or 3 blocks, and some things we might go through smoothly. So, we're going to do our best. We really don't know how it's going to go.
Yeah, first off, I would say I completely understand that. With respect to the schedule, staff isn't sure how it's going to go, but it was essentially intended to be a template, and it can move wherever and however it needs to move. But it kind of identified and attempted to break down the various tasks that were going to be involved in what, at least at this point, appear to be a logical sequence and a logical time period with a break where it made sense to kind of come back together as a group and check to see that everyone's in agreement.
I think the PC understood that and received it really well, I think.
Yeah, so, but the fact that it may take longer to get through some of those items than what the time shown is allotting, I think that is absolutely what the expectation was. With respect to the points that you identified where you needed some additional clarification, I'm going to propose that end up coming back to council at its very next meeting, so that you folks can actually do that. To the extent that you're able to begin to move forward.
To build on to.
You know, without that specific clarification, I would encourage the planning commission and our staff to try to do that. But we definitely want to have council provide you with that additional clarification on those particular points, so you have as much clarity as possible on what the intent is. So I appreciate the comments.
Yeah, I like that approach. I mean, there was a couple of real quick ones we could have addressed in there, but this would be a more deliberate process, I think would probably be of more value to Planning Commission to address those, answer those questions, address concerns. So, I mean, you know, the reference to the blocking, that was simply that our consultant was encouraging us to retain that required element as much as we could. So anyway, so that if there's no objection here to the manager's proposed, that's how we'll deal with that part.
Okay.
So anything else to report on?
Nope, that's all.
All right, well, any questions then?
No question.
No questions. And I apologize, normally if we're taking action on a subdivision and we have a member from the Planning Commission here, I would generally call on them before we took the action, like we did on Shiloh Road. So for that, I apologize. But we didn't take anything, Matt, we didn't do anything that was, it was contrary to what Planning Commission had.
No, we approved it. Okay. We recommended it.
Yeah, that's what I saw, so.
Thank you.
All right, that would conclude then what we call our liaison reports. That takes us to staff and other committee reports, which I don't believe we have any, do we?
No.
No? Okay. And then the final item on the reports is our diversity, equity, inclusion, and belonging reports. If we have anybody in the public, this would be their opportunity to comment under that. In the meantime, I would turn to Mike. Anything to report there?
You know, consistent with our normal kind of sequencing, being the second meeting, it's a little light this time around, but I do want to highlight under your consent agenda 2 proclamations. Proclamation 04 and 05. 04 being May as Asian Pacific American Heritage Month, as we highlighted at the last meeting. And Proclamation 5 recognizing June as LGBTQ plus Pride Month. So we're a little ahead of that one and a little behind on the first one, but I did want to call your attention to those 2 proclamations.
Well, that's what happens when we don't have meetings on the first of the month, right?
Right.
Okay. Anything on Mike's report or anything else to add, council? I'm not seeing any hands raised in the public or in the room. So we'll bring that item to a conclusion, and that concludes our reports and moves us to the consent agenda. Tonight's consent agenda has numerous items. The first is under CA1, our minutes. We have one set of minutes, which is our May 2nd, 2024 regular council meeting minutes. CA2, correspondence. We have 4 items. A letter from Central Pennsylvania Festival of the Arts dated April 24th, 2024 regarding donation. The second item is B, email from Noreen Corey dated May 10th, 2024 regarding her resignation from the Planning Commission. The third item is CA2C, email from Chris Danford dated May 13th, 2024 regarding Harris Acres Bike Pedestrian Path. And CA2D, the last item is an email from Laura Danini dated May 9th, 2024 regarding dangerous road conditions, left turn lane from State Route 26 to State Route, which should be US Route 322.
Sorry about that, yeah.
And then the third area of the council agenda is our action items, of which there are 5. CA3A, Project 24-08, Traffic Signal Replacement Project bid award to Karharchik Construction Incorporated in the amount of $229,000. The second is CA3B, Contract 24-15, Pike Street Rehabilitation, Dale Street to College Avenue Project to HRI Incorporated in the amount of $473,656. The third item is CA3C, Project 24-02, Trout Road Path Extension Project to Bowman Excavating, Paving, and Concrete in the amount of $45,450.75. The fourth item is CA3D, Proclamation P-24-04, May is Asian Pacific American Heritage Month. And lastly, CA3E, Proclamation P-24-05, June is LGBTQ plus Pride Month. That's the extent of the council agenda. Is there anyone who would like any items of that pulled before we consider action to accept them, the consent agenda as presented? Looking Tracy, looking to Rich. I do want to pull out item CA2D for a very brief discussion. So if there's no objection, I'll entertain a motion to accept the council consent agenda as presented minus CA2D.
So moved.
Second.
All approved signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. CA2D, I just wanted to note that I'm a frequent traveler through that intersection, I think as all of us are, and I think it'd be hard not to notice that the overflow of queuing up in the turn lanes creates backups. It blocks the travel lane in the morning in the inbound direction, in the afternoon in the outbound direction. And as luck would have it, just the other day we had an accident there, a pretty bad accident. I'm not sure if it was related at all to the queuing stack or not, because it was on the side of the bridge where the queuing stack would back up, but it was on the other side of the road. But my point is that although conditions are limited, constrained by length, you only have so many feet to divide up those two queuing lanes, that I think it's incumbent upon us to maybe ask staff to engage in some conversations with PennDOT to see if there is something we can do short-term, whether it's maybe just look at the data and see if we can take a little bit from one of the turn lanes and add it to the other, or is the queuing, is there an imbalance in the queuing that would allow for, another 2 or 3 cars to get out of the lane of traffic? And, maybe not, but I think it's a reasonable request to at least review it at this point. It's been that way since it opened.
Yes.
And I think it's half of it's dedicated to one direction turn and the other half. And if half of the if the data shows that's the way it should be, then that's the way it should be. And I think Mike mentioned that at one point that bridge is due for rehab in a couple of years. In all likelihood, there'll be an opportunity maybe to get some design elements into the rehab that would offer more options than just robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's what I wanted to offer. Is there any objection from council asking staff to see if we can engage PennDOT?
Right, and at a minimum, share the concern with them.
Keep it top of mind with them, and maybe we can find out a little bit more on the timeline for the bridge rehab and what potential opportunities may exist there for a long-term solution. Kind of getting it in the queue.
I think it's also prudent for us to collect some of the crash data that we have over the last 3 to 5 years. And there's definitely crash data related out here. So if we can put that together prior to approaching PennDOT and having a conversation, I think that PennDOT is likely aware of the condition and situation, but I think that the fact that we are providing that kind of data and driving home the point can only help the conversation.
Okay, I don't think we need a motion. I think you have consensus at this point.
Great, we'll
Okay.
get on that.
Then all I would need then is a motion to accept the remaining item of consent agenda CA2D.
So moved.
And a second?
Second.
All right, all in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Motion carries. That concludes the consent agenda. That takes us to old business, OB1, Attainable Workforce Housing Ordinance. This is potential action in the sense that staff is looking for a remand to Planning Commission. So before we consider that action, Mike, you have a review for us
Sure.
where we are?
Yeah, I'm pinch hitting for Lindsay tonight, and it's a continuation of the ongoing discussion. And you know, I heard Matt's comments, and one of the things that I would recognize is, you know, as we move into these more difficult subjects, this form-based code, I think that give and take between council and planning commission is going to become more of the norm than the exception, and that's healthy, in my opinion, in terms of ordinance development. And I hear loud and clear what you're saying as well, Matt, about, you know, the community's engagement happening at this level. I think sending this back to you forces that discussion back to you as well. So just wanted to kind of encapsulate a couple points in reference to what you had brought up and the concerns you had shared, which I think are all valid. So in front of you tonight, as I mentioned, is a continuation of the discussion that you had at the last meeting. As you'll recall, Lindsay went through a pretty methodical step-by-step process of 15 issues. What's coming back before you tonight is a request to take another look at those, just reconfirm what we heard from you, and maybe build upon it where it's relevant. You know, and I provided the example in the memo, or Lindsay provided, excuse me, in the memo, the example of when we were talking about parkland and open space. There were some discussions around proximity, accessibility, and the scale of the park that would be discussed. Those types of considerations for PC to consider as they start moving towards crafting the actual ordinance language for a updated version of the workforce housing or attainable housing ordinance, as it so be. The next step in that, or next point that I also wanted to raise was, in the process of going through this evaluation and further research by staff, there was a recognition there were 3 additional items that are referenced in the memo, that being the composition of the fee in lieu formula, discussion on the missing middle gap, and there's a 15% delta between where our rental provisions end and the owner-occupied begins. And what can be done in that gap that's there. And then also attributed to that is some discussion on maybe changing where the rental unit ends. So currently it's at 65% AMI, maybe some discussion of bumping that up to 70% or some number of that in that magnitude to try to close that gap and make it a little bit more manageable and addressable as part of, you know, the work that the township does in this area. So really the goal tonight is to walk through this list, have a discussion about and you know, again, reconfirm or build upon what we heard from council at the last meeting, add a little bit more consideration where it's appropriate, and then ultimately culminate that discussion in the development of a remand letter back to Planning Commission so that they can consider and do a little bit more development on the ordinance language moving forward. In terms of the remand development process, once we get through this discussion tonight, if council is so prepared, we would look for your authorization to craft that remand letter, and then that would be shared with you before it was distributed to Planning Commission, just to make sure that we hit the mark on what you were looking for. So I will stop there, Eric, and if there's any questions before I move into the kind of step-by-step evaluation, if there are any questions on procedures.
I have one. The additional items, 1, 2,
Yes.
and 3, the expectation is that they'll be folded into the matrix in some way.
Right, yeah, it's not, we're not asking council necessarily to do a deep dive on those tonight, just to add those to the remand. It's something that Planning Commission didn't have on their radar when they went through this the first time. We'd like to give them the first shot at it, and then ultimately that's going to come back to you for further consideration.
So what we're really just looking at tonight is, do we want those three things in their general form in the matrix?
To include in the remand.
Right.
That be
For their
included. Okay,
consideration.
good, that's what I was hoping. So, I mean, the matrix itself, we've already been through. So I don't know that we need to go through that in detail. So why don't we, the way we do this is, I'll look to Tracy and Rich and see if there's anything in that matrix that, having had second thoughts about or more time, needs to be adjusted, edited, or anything, or you.
Sure.
Having put it together and wrote it. But first, Rich or Tracy, anything in the matrix that we need to pull out and revisit? And Mike, as you put the matrix together, did you see anything that you felt you needed further clarification from staff, or you had second thoughts about, or Lindsay did?
Yeah, the only places that I know Lindsay and I had any thoughts is when we move into that other considerations point. We feel like it's an encapsulation of what we've heard to this point towards the development. And to her credit, she has shared Planning Commission, development community, and what we've heard from council. So this is that building of the discussion. But primarily we're looking at your column to make sure that what was documented here is what you wanted us to document, and then if there's anything you want to do to build upon it. So like I said, where I have maybe a couple comments is in that other considerations realm.
Okay, and that appears to be where you're looking for maybe a bit more direction from council?
If you feel it's appropriate.
Okay. And I would add that Adam and I received some written comments from Susan late today, and I didn't have, did you all get a copy? Okay. I didn't have the time to go through them in detail, but my general impression was that most of them were not necessarily something that we would weave into this. There were a few exceptions.
Right.
They were concepts that we'll have a chance to form better and affect more once we get the draft back from Planning Commission and we talk about it. However, the very first one, she was pretty, that was pretty definite that she favored workforce housing to attainable housing. So I mean, that's what we're looking for at this point then. If there's no general comments or suggested changes, under consideration, anybody have any objection to us, to the attainable housing reference? I thought that was already determined, but.
Yeah, I was just looking for your confirmation on that.
Okay.
So.
Yeah, essentially, and again, and really, the intent to this evening really is not for you folks to regurgitate the conversation that we had at the last meeting.
Right.
What this represents is what staff heard in terms of the comments. And
Okay.
unless there is a misinterpretation, which is what we're trying to decipher at this point, if there's not a misinterpretation of the comments made by council, then we're seeking to craft a remand letter for your review. That said, the comments that Susan did provide, there are several that are in conflict with what staff heard. And from my perspective, I believe that we can weave those contra comments, if you will, into the remand, so that Planning Commission has a full picture that generally council believes this. On the other hand, there is concern about that. And I think that we can do that in a well-crafted remand letter and make sure that all of council's comments are being properly represented.
Okay. I like that approach, because none of us really had a chance to give too much thought to those that were in conflict since this afternoon when it came out. Okay, and then, lastly, the three additional items. Any objection to at least, conceptually, those things being weaved into the matrix? And then if there isn't, detail beyond what you've suggested, is there any necessary, you feel, in order for it? Any more specific direction needed out of those
Yeah,
three?
I'm going to steal whatever thunder you
Go
have
ahead.
here on this, real quick. Yeah, so the first item that's mentioned here is what's the formula?
Composition of the fee and lieu
Yeah,
formula?
okay, that already exists. It's just that nobody's talked about it.
Right.
Okay, so there is a formula, there is a structure to it, but neither PC nor council have heard it, know it, couldn't recite it, under penalty of death at this point. So we need to be sure that that gets factored in, so that if there are questions, they can be answered and we can handle it that way. So that's, in my opinion, I think that's a fairly easy one.
Okay.
Just so you know. In terms of the other two, yeah, these are basically what end up being gaps, since it's generally accepted that folks like 65% AMI for rentals, that's great, and that's what we have presently existing in the ordinance. And then we jump for owner occupied to 80 to 120. And when we talk about owner occupied, what we're talking about is the reality that if there will be owner occupied units, the reality is that people that make between 80 and 120 are the ones that are going to be able to participate in that portion of the program. The problem is taking those two together, 65% of AMI for rental and 80 to 120 for owner occupancy, there is a gap of 15%. These are folks that at the moment our ordinance doesn't contemplate. And there's a number of different ways to, as Mike suggested earlier, to shrink that gap, A, or B, to develop some additional element that has not been discussed at this point about serving that presently existing 15% gap between the cutoff 65% for rental and 80% for owner occupied. That's the issue, and that's what needs probably much more so conversation than what the formula is about. So
we're looking, there's a couple ways we could do that. We could just present that as an issue as part of the remand letter, or if there were strong feelings between the three of us and or Susan, provide a little bit more specific direction as part of the remand. Any feelings one way or the other? Or is there a third option?
not that I'm aware of, and frankly, my recommendation to council would be just to formulate it and send it on.
Send it off.
Yes.
Yeah, that would be, I support that.
I support it.
With the idea, or with the encouragement that something come out of it.
Right.
That we don't end up in the same place.
Right.
And really, in looking at the items that are listed, number 2 and number 3 are the identical issue.
Well, that's what I was wondering. I didn't
So there really are only 2 issues that we're addressing here. Lindsay broke them out because of the way that we had discussed it internally. But there's really, number 2 and number 3 that are listed in the memo are really the identical issue.
They're part and parcel.
So there's only technically two issues that have not been covered.
Well, I was just gonna say, I would anticipate, similar to what, before our last meeting, that the planning commission came back and said, hey, I need more direction. And so I would like to give them the opportunity to do that if they need more direction on that item.
On the, or either
Yeah.
of these two?
Yeah.
Okay.
Without painting them into a corner.
Right. And then I would retract what I said, because by us saying you need to do something kind of paints them into a corner too, because they could evaluate all the options and say there isn't a good solution there.
Or to determine one, I need direction.
Or we need more direction, yeah. Okay. So with having heard that, it doesn't sound like there's any objection to moving those items into the matrix, taking Susan's comments where applicable, weaving them into the matrix, and then using that to draft up a remand for our review. And the expectation is we would see that when the remand letter?
I'm hoping within 2 weeks.
Okay.
That's fair. Yeah.
Okay. So does that direction need to come in the form of a motion?
We've done that in the
Yeah,
past,
okay.
a simple motion to authorize staff to draft a remand letter for council review prior to forwarding to PC.
Okay. Anyone, would anyone like to move such? You don't have to repeat it.
Okay. So
What he said.
And I have a second. All in favor of the motion as described by our manager
Aye.
and supported by council, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion carries. Thank you, Adam and Mike.
Yeah, I apologize.
No, I'll happily cede my time.
That's the life of the assistant manager.
It's all good.
You do the work, he gets the credit.
I'm not award winning.
You are now. You are now.
Oh, he's a quick study, isn't he?
It's been nice working with you.
The AI is looking good, Mike.
Oh, boy. That concludes old business then, and it takes us to new business, of which we only have 2 items left now. The first of which is NB1, Employee Retirement Bonus. This one is another item, agenda item that with action is requested. However, before we ask for action, Adam, are you going to review the requested action for us?
Sure. As council may recall, a number of years ago, we adopted for the township a retirement bonus policy. One of the reasons that was done is that none of accrued sick time is paid out upon separation. And we had a number of longer-term employees that retired here from College Township that had accumulated a significant amount of leave over a significant number of years. And as a result, it was brought forward that it would be nice to acknowledge our longer-term retiring employees that have been with us for a number of years, and in a way that we may be able to monetize that would be to create a policy utilizing unused and accrued sick time. Since they're not taking that with them, it no longer is an obligation of the township to retain on the books. And so in essence, the policy was born out of that type of concept. So moving forward, we've done several of these now for, I think, 4 of our retiring workers over the last 5 to 6 years. And the way that this works is there's really 2 different ways that by the policy that we can calculate an actual bonus. One is strictly based on number of years that are served at $100 a year. The other, which is is more lucrative potentially to the employee, is utilizing a calculation of 5% of accrued hours times the final hourly base rate of pay, provided that the employee is an average of 40 or more sick hours per year of service. So essentially, you take the total accumulated block of sick hours that an individual has had, you divide that by the number of years of service. If in fact that calculates out to 40 or more, the individual is entitled to the 5% of that times the last rate of pay. In this particular case that we're talking about this evening, Mr. Long was short by about 6 hours annually of reaching that 5% threshold. And so by calculation, it would default to the $100 times number of years of service. The policy is also, however, explicit in that council can do anything or nothing. And so this can only come to council through a recommendation by the manager. And I am making the recommendation that we make a retirement bonus award in this particular case. The ultimate sum is to be determined by council. You have some guidelines, a couple of different paths that you can take, but it is entirely council's prerogative here, anything from 0 to whatever council deems to be appropriate.
Okay. Questions for the manager? Tracy?
No questions.
Rich?
No question.
Okay. You mentioned 4 previous employees
Right,
that not before Bob.
correct.
And did...
At least 3, and I think it was 4, I'm sorry.
The council did authorize some form of bonus to all of them?
Yes,
And do you remember if it was the year, based on the year's service, or the...
2 were based on years of service, 1 was based on the 5% calculation.
Okay. So the ones based on years of service, did council authorize the straight-up amount, or did...
I believe in both of those cases, it was the straight-up amount.
Okay. So in this case, that would be the 2,400 number?
That's correct, yeah.
Okay. Just for context.
I do have a question. And for those other situations, were they shy of any hours or they met the hours?
They were significantly under, for the ones that were awarded based on strict number of years of service, they were significantly short of the 40-hour average per year. The individual that with the 5% was significantly above the 40-hour a year average.
Okay.
Yeah, in this case, Mr. Long was close, but not quite. He would have been much closer than any of the other 2 that did not receive.
Well, that's a good question. Then that begs the question, by missing by only average of 6 hours, you said, a week, what would that difference then have been had he qualified? Any ballpark number?
You know what, I didn't do the calculation, I'm sorry.
But it would have been, clearly would have been a higher amount.
Yes.
Okay.
I
So
mean,
we
well,
were-
I can-
so we're looking for a rationale
Right.
to possibly round up in his case.
Right.
Because he was much closer to what he would have got than others
Yeah,
were, that could be it.
That's correct, yeah. My apologies, I have the calculation, but it failed to get into the packet, and so I don't have a reference point to give you, because I don't remember.
But it clearly would have been more. 'Cause
Yeah, oh,
he would have
yes,
done that.
absolutely, absolutely.
So, given that, any thoughts or suggestions? I just threw that out there.
No, it's good. I think I have 2 thoughts. One, this is the policy we have, and under this, absolutely, I wish it was more. He's an incredibly valuable member of staff and everything like that, but this is the policy we have. So I absolutely support the manager's recommendation at that, but I would follow it up and ask if the manager would review our current policy in light of, that we've used it a couple of times now, whether there's potentially a better number in there so that people don't
Fall short?
fall short by such a little.
Right.
So, following up on Rich's suggestion, so basically if he earns, say, 12 days a year, which is kind of standard practice, you would have to leave having used less than 7, average used less than 7 days a year to have left the 5 days to 40 hours.
Right.
So that really means you still had somebody work 25 years and just used a little bit over half of their sick time. That might be an area you could look at. It doesn't necessarily have to be the $1,000 a year, it could be that 40 number.
Yeah, that's, I'm not really looking at the per year, I'm looking at the.
How to get him closer to meeting the
40.
threshold that would have been,
Yeah.
he would have benefited from.
Understood.
All right, well then, if you're looking for action tonight, is there any Is there any motion for what's suggested here or some variation of it?
Mr. Chair, I will wholeheartedly recommend that we move to authorize a bonus payment to Mr. Robert Long Jr. in the amount of $2,400 in recognition of his outstanding service to College Township over the course of his 24-plus year career as a College Township employee and finance director, and further to direct the Township Finance Director or their alternate
Or
to arrange payment from the Township's unreserved fund balance.
I have a motion. Do I have a second?
I second.
All right. Any questions? You need any staff need any clarification on the motion? All right. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Anyone opposed? No one is opposed. Motion carries. And then it was understood outside of the motion that as time permits, as the opportunity permits, let's revisit that calculation. Okay, that concludes NB1. That takes us to our last new business item of the evening, NB3, the 2025-2029 Draft Capital Improvement Plan, CIP. This is a discussion-only item. It's meant to kind of kick off the process. Is that correct, Mike?
Sure. We are going to ask you for authorization at the end of the discussion to set up our traditional CIP work session. And we offer some, a range of dates, sometime between the 30th of May and the 14th of June, with the goal that we're aiming for action on the CIP at the second meeting in June. With that said, I just wanted to, this is as much a transmittal letter as it is anything, but for the purposes of discussion, I just wanted to share with you that the CIP is obviously in a draft form at this point for council's consideration. It is a major component of our budget development and truly one of the first steps in development of our annual budget. You had previously, earlier this year, worked through some of the strategic planning elements that we incorporated over the last couple years into the CIP, specifically looking at our mission, values, goals, statements, and that alignment of those statements with our objectives and implementation strategies as part of the draft CIP. So I think as each year we do this, we probably get a little bit better in how those alignments fall. And as you have a chance to dive into your binder, you'll see we're starting to mark some things off the list. So as we move into the next CIP development and even some discussion of this one, there may be things that we have to add to that to keep this aspirational kind of development of projects in the queue and moving forward here at College Township. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things and won't spend a lot of time on the pie chart or the spreadsheet that was included. As you know, the first year of the CIP we consider our capital budget year, and that's as close as we can get to what we think is going to go into the budget as possible. We're pretty close to real dollars at that point. And what's presented for you in the draft CIP is a just over $3.1 million capital budget year of 2025, and that incorporates projects from all of our major categories, from technology right through the heavy lifts of public works and signals and buildings and grounds, stormwater, paths, roads, all of those things. You're looking at, again, just over $3.1 million. Cumulatively, for the 5-year CIP, you're looking at just under $17 million. And what I show here in the spreadsheet is just a breakdown of what that looks like. Obviously, the heavy lift for us falls in that stormwater and other infrastructure category. And that one's probably a little inflated because we've been carrying the path to campus for a couple years. And this year we're getting much closer to real dollars and obviously have had some grant awards to move that project forward. So it's becoming real. That's probably inflated that number a little bit beyond the norm. One that I would call your attention to, and again, as you work through the CIP, we did put some charts in the back in what I'm calling the look back section of the CIP, and then we have a look forward section of the CIP. In the look back, one of the areas that I will call your attention to in terms of how it's trending is traffic signals. you can see the climb that's happening with traffic signals. And it's a reflection of, higher technology, higher number, higher expense associated with that feature that we work on here at College Township. The rest of them stay pretty consistent. You can see some trend lines with them, but that one's definitely an area of growth that I would want to call to your attention. I don't want to go any deeper than that. I'm happy to take questions, but otherwise what we're looking for out of you tonight is for you to authorize us to start setting up our CIP work session, and that'll probably culminate in a doodle poll to gauge in everybody's availability, and we will do that as a work session.
Okay. So just to reiterate, we're not getting into the CIP tonight. We're just starting the process. However, this would be an opportunity if you saw anything in this sketch plan process to identify. And before I open up for questions, also I would say, since the requested action does identify a window, do we have anybody that's going to be away for those 2 weeks? Should we, is that a good enough window? So I'll be asking that consensus here amongst at least the three of us. I assume staff, embedded with staff already.
Some of your staff would be
In general,
missing
yeah.
for a significant period of that time in
All right. I was
the
just,
beginning part of June. But
so, with that, Tracy, any thoughts? We're good to start moving forward? This will be your first shot at this, at least at the capital improvement.
Yeah, I think we're good to move forward.
Okay. Any issues with finding availability to come in, probably 1-2 hour session
Nope.
in that window?
Nope, I'm good. I don't have any plans.
Okay. Rich?
No, suggesting for a friend, food be involved.
we can accommodate.
So we're looking for a dinner session. Dinner
Or lunch.
Or lunch. Or lunch. So I would suggest that the doodle poll come out as soon as possible.
Sure.
Because sometimes we get doodle polls, and by the time people get around to responding, we're already into the dates. That's just the way we work. Not staff, I'm talking about the people who have to respond.
Everyone works
The
out.
one
Yes.
note that I will add to that is that window, the starting point of that window was a reflection of giving you 2 weeks to look at the CIP and develop your questions before we go into a work session. We certainly can bump it up if you want to do that sooner, but that was the rationale behind the 30th being the starting point.
Okay,
I think that's good.
but then, continuing in that theme, put a deadline on the doodle poll, because I don't think it's fair for staff to have to keep chasing people down and asking them to respond.
Or for us to, individual members to have to keep that 2 weeks open.
Open, and that's where my concern is coming from. I'm the first one to fill it out, and 2 weeks later, I've filled half those dates with something else, so.
You keep looking at me, Eric.
No, it's actually, you haven't been involved in those. The people I'm talking about have been involved in those before, so.
Yeah, sure. You're okay.
You're
still
okay.
Do
A
you,
couple years from now, maybe not.
do you want to say whether or not you want like a 5 to 7, or do you want me to, I mean, I've done it in the past where we've said 5 to 7, 6 to 8, and we've kind of given you options, or do we want to say 5 to 7? So we have
Good
an
question.
early night or a
Yeah, should we rule out?
late night? Or,
Do we want just evenings, just lunches, obviously no weekends, right?
Correct.
Do you have a preference, Rich?
I'll have to adjust my schedule regardless,
Yeah,
so.
I'm probably as open as anyone, so,
I'm good. I'll make time whenever.
so if it's a 12 to 2, that would work?
In the summers it works.
Okay. So it looks
I'm
like,
sure staff would like 12 to 2.
yeah, well, I mean, as long as there's,
Food.
just saying for a friend.
For a friend.
I like the way you think.
So 12 to 2s are fair.
Okay, I mean, I don't know, Susan is probably the,
Well,
Susan and Dustin, yeah.
provided it's a Wednesday,
that's right, she's
that
off
may
on
work,
Wednesdays now.
it may work for Susan.
Yeah, that's right.
Okay, is it, are we ruling out then 2 to 4, 4 to?
I think we gotta show it, but I think
Yeah.
provide
Add some
windows and
extras.
open.
Yeah,
Okay.
my recommendation is we'll do some 10 to 2s and we'll do likely some 5 to 7,
10 to 2, 10?
or did I say, I meant 12 to 2. That's
11
what I
to
meant to
1,
say.
Whatever.
Whatever it takes.
That's a lunch and breakfast.
And
All right.
is 5 to 7 a good spot, or should we shift it to 6?
Yeah, by the-
Okay, so we'll do 12 noon to 2s and 5 to 7s.
All right. So we have feedback on the date range, we have feedback on the time, and we have general support for what Mike has laid out here. I will offer my one and only comment, and is that $600 under bikeways and others under the year 2025 just stands out like a sore thumb.
Yeah, and that's something that, in putting it together, that you recognize. A lot of our bikeway path type projects have slid under that stormwater and other infrastructure. So it may be a restructuring of that piece.
Right.
So-
It gives kind of the wrong,
Well, it's not really accurate in terms of what the reality is.
yes, and anybody who looks at that, it just not.
Doesn't know that.
Yeah, it doesn't know that.
Doesn't know.
In this, just this sheet, single sheet, so. All right, so it sounded like though staff was more comfortable if we put that, authorization in the form of a motion, or is this consensus you've heard enough?
I think
go
this is
either way.
just consensus at
Okay.
this point.
Okay, well, thanks, Mike, for making this as easy as possible for us at this point. 9:30 tonight. Appreciate that. If there's no further discussion, that takes us to staff informatives. Anybody have any questions, or does staff have anything to add on what's in there? Quick question, the short-term rental violations that are in here, are they still being identified through our software? Is that what's catching them?
Yeah, the answer is yes.
Okay.
Software, short-term rental.
Is the software's picking those up?
Yes, we've had a couple little glitches, but it's working great.
But it's not neighbors calling in?
No.
It's generally
This
happening?
is primarily, these are, the service that we are paying for is delivering the information that we need to effective enforcement. We have had a couple of issues with, there was a period of time where, and I'm not sure what happened, but whether they changed some software or did some things, but there was kind of a dead period there for a couple of weeks. But I think we're past that at this point.
Yeah,
Okay.
we're still consistently having new ones come online. And we actually started rescinding rental permits about 2 weeks ago in small batches, and these were ones that had not renewed yet this year. We're into May, they have not renewed, and we've been notifying Code, and Code has been rescinding the permits as well.
Okay, so it's working as planned?
Yes, and we've had a big uptick in the last few days of people reaching out to pay since their permits are getting rescinded.
That's the only question I had. Then, if there are no other, anything else under staff informatives, do we have any other matters? Staff?
I just had one note. A while back, I had sent out a survey related to Thompson Woods Preserve. In an effort to push that to 100%, I'm going to resend. I don't know who answered it or not, so I'm going to resend it to everybody just seeking 100% completion of that survey. We do have a meeting set up here with the managers of both State College Borough and College Township to talk about protocols and procedures moving forward, how things come out of that new governance structure and move forward to our respective councils. So just be on the lookout. That'll probably be coming in an email tomorrow.
It's a really short
Yeah,
survey.
it is.
So please, yeah, when it comes through again, I encourage everybody to take it.
Yeah, I'm aiming for 100% response rate, so.
So since you brought that up, can you tell the difference between somebody who, same person fills it out twice versus somebody who hasn't filled it out?
Right now, I can't.
So if I go out and fill it out 4 more times, I can help us get to that.
There you go.
I'm just asking.
It's a strategy.
You have
You
to.
can talk about that with your colleagues offline.
If I end up with 9 members of council, I know there's a problem. So-
Challenge accepted.
All right.
110%.
Anything from council under other matters? Anything from council under adjournment?
I move that we adjourn.
I like that movement. And I'm not even going to wait for a second there. We're adjourned. Thank you.